I have. Oh my god, I sounded so common then. Let me just have a drink. We don't have any squash in the house, but I bought some lemons. So I'm having a lemon water and I feel like such a model. I just need the face to come with it. Oh look, my negative self-worth being in the room. There was unintentional emotional distance. That your partner is literally God and you are the devil. I read that and I didn't take any of that in. It was like ASMR that. It would confirm your deep-seated belief that you're somehow worthless or unlovable. Bloody hell. I'm becoming Zen, which I know is like such a vile thing, so intolerable. Wow, this is wild. We're learning together today. Oh, what a revelation. Revelation. But with boys, I'm really cold to them. Are you likely to like a guy that you know doesn't like you back? I promise I'm going to start doing more for the plot. We are going to be talking about attachment theory and attachment styles. Welcome to a conversation with Erin. You are currently listening to Erin. I know, big shock. And this is our safe space. Have a bit of a chat about anything we like, really. I do have social medias where you can put across your views, your questions, your requests, anything you like. So make sure you check those out. They're all either a conversation with Erin or conversation with Erin. And enjoy today's episode. So this week, I'm actually not going to do too much of a long weekly roundup this week. And that is purely because I haven't done much. I did go and see the Barbie movie, but that will come in a minute. Lots has been going on, but like not a lot to talk about. Like my nan's been in hospital for like the second time in a month. So that's preoccupied quite a lot of my brain. I've been doing a lot of this. I'm still unemployed, so still been looking for jobs. So yeah, nothing too exciting, unfortunately. I promise I'm going to start doing more for the plot. The plot is to bring and share with you. But why I said the Barbie movie will come a bit later is because I'm going to test out doing mini episodes. So I often find that I end up cutting the topic that I want to speak about down a lot more because there's something else that I want to speak about, but it's not long enough to be its own episode, if that makes sense. So I thought I would start doing mini episodes. I don't know whether they're going to be every week or fortnightly, and they will probably be uploaded on a Tuesday. And they'll be like 15 minutes long. And then you've got the full-length episode on a Friday, which will be more about, I'll do a weekly roundup in that. We will have our like gratitudes and stuff at the end, and the topic can be a little bit more juicy. Obviously, I can do that right now because I'm not employed. When I actually do have a life, I don't know whether that's something that we can continue, but I thought we'd give it a go. So Tuesday's episode, like the first ever little mini ep, is going to be about the Barbie movie, and I'm super excited. That's going to be a lot more casual, less scripted, more chatty, more conversational. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for that. So make sure you are either following on Spotify or subscribed to this YouTube channel to make sure you're here for it. I think I looked the other day and it's something insane, like 90% of people aren't subscribed. So if you are coming back to the channel, which is absolutely amazing, it's so wow to me and exciting, just click the subscribe button. You see, I know this is really annoying, I'm saying this, it's so annoying when somebody does this, but if you do it now, I'll be forever indebted to you. How about that? Literally the only other thing on my weekly roundup, this is how boring my life's been. I had a vitamin B12 jab. So bless her heart, my mum, obviously I'm not working, the funds are low, but I have Crohn's disease. So I don't like to mention it at all. So it means that I get extremely fatigued, especially as we haven't been having that much sun. So I've been feeling very, very fatigued recently. I've been really struggling and it's just so frustrating. So my mum has said to me, I'll pay for like your loading dose of vitamin B12 jabs and we'll see where we go from there. So I had my B12 jab. Bearing in mind the day before I had to give myself my injection for my illness, which it's like almost like a pen and it goes straight into my muscle. I'm more than happy to do a podcast about Crohn's disease in the future if you'd like. Yeah, I just don't want to sound boring with it, but I think that is something that I'm going to do. Anyway, so it's not nice, it hurts, but it's over very quickly. And yeah, so I did that the day before and I'm absolutely fine with needles, fine with blood tests. Like, I don't feel them because I think I'm so used to them now. Oh my god, it so hurt. It took forever. I had a lump on my arm. Like, even my dad pointed it out. Like, what is that? Like, where the liquid was just sitting. It's such a big injection. I didn't look at it, but she was like, oh, it might sting a bit. And I'm like, yeah, of course, they always say that. No, it did sting. I even said to him, like, oh my god, it does sting. Like, it really hurt. And that's not to put anybody off because it was obviously bearable. It was fine. But it really stung and I just wasn't expecting it. So hopefully I feel something from the jabs, because otherwise I'm putting myself through extra needles once a month, which I don't really need to do. So I'll keep you updated on that, but I'm assuming it will take a little while for it to properly kick in and sink in and stuff, because all things like that do. So the topic today, we are going to be talking about attachment theory and attachment styles. So it's not going to be really boring, and well, I hope it's not going to be really boring, but it's not just going to be spewing theory at you, because to be honest, that doesn't really, I've done enough of that. That was 3 years of hell, my university course of spewing theory. So we're not going to do that today. But it come up in therapy about my attachment style, and this is something that's come up before, but not as in depth as we did the last session I had. And my therapist emailed me a link to do a test, and it's a free website. I think it's attachmenttheory.com or whatever. You can just search attachment, what is my attachment style quiz, and loads come up, and as long as it looks reputable or it's psychological based, just go for it. Or maybe do a few if you've got the time, and then see like the average out of what you may be. And she said it might be really interesting, and then you can come back in and do it, because I was talking about the relationship that I have in terms of dating, but also the relationship I have with my mum. They weren't connected. Want to clarify, not connected. They were two separate topics, but it just so happened they both had underpinnings of insecure attachment. So I thought today we would talk a little bit about the basics of attachment theory, like literally like the very basics, and then talk about different attachment styles and how they can affect your life and what you can actually do to help yourself. Because what was said to me by my therapist is it's almost like habit, because it's a self-defense coping mechanism. So you can unlearn your attachment style and you can learn how to work with it, so you can then form healthy attachments, which will then obviously help in terms of relationships and things like that. Let's talk a little bit about what is the attachment theory. So John Bowlby, if you don't know who he is, he's kind of your main guy when you're thinking about attachment theory. And he proposed that attachment can be understood within an evolutionary context, in that the caregiver provides safety and security for the infant. Attachment is adaptive as it enhances the infant's chance of survival. Basically, it comes from the idea that children are biologically pre-programmed to form attachments in order to survive, and based on your relationship with your caregiver is how that attachment forms to longevity. for example. There are criticisms of the attachment theory, and before I go into this whole podcast based on the attachment theory as a way of understanding yourself, I think it's very important to address these criticisms because I don't want anyone thinking this is gospel. It's a theory. It makes a lot of sense to some people, doesn't to others. I think some of it can be taken with a pinch of salt. I think that it's important to know personally about your attachment style because I think that it can help you in the long run, but I wouldn't base my life choices off of my attachment style. I think I would just use it as a way to learn about myself and better myself. It's very nurture based, doesn't really take into account nature at all, and obviously you have the whole nature versus nurture debate, but we all get into what my attachment style is when we talk about the different styles. But I am inherently an anxious person. I come out of the womb anxious, so it doesn't take into account that all of my ancestors were extremely anxious, and it also doesn't take into account my genetic makeup to make me who I am. Nurture isn't everything. I think it holds a lot of weight, but I think nature does as well. Similar to that, it doesn't recognise external influences outside the attachment. For example, social class, gender, ethnicity, culture, personality. All of those things, I think, affect the way that you view the world and you act with the world. How you interact with other people. I think that those are things that should be taken into account. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth are kind of who I personally think of when I think of the attachment theory. Those were the two therapists, psychologists, people that kind of investigated it and created a lot of from what I learned about the attachment theory and the style of therapy that works with attachment theory, they're kind of the underpinners. They both researched it in their own ways. I'm not going to go into like what they did to research it. You can research that yourself. Go on Google Scholar, search one of their names. You will be in for a field day. So much comes up, but the kind of the basic criticisms of them are the research that they did to understand the different types of attachment styles and the traits that come with them were based on momentary separation from the caregiver and the child, whereas it wasn't based on like ordinary situations. It was based on extreme, intense stress situations, which could be argued that does that represent day-to-day, everyday life? Not really. They're in a high stress situation in an environment they don't know, being watched by people they don't know. The symptoms that kind of gave the traits and stuff were looked at based on only the primary caregiver leaving. I know from my childhood I had attachments with lots of people because of the way my life was. My mum went back to work when I was a few months old. My dad worked. They both worked full time. So during the day, my grandparents were my primary caregivers. So I would have had an attachment to them. Teachers at school, potentially, friends, childminder. Children are going to have more than just one primary caregiver attachment that may implicate. Of course, my dad's phoning me. Yeah, so children may act differently based on each different attachment, and each different attachment might implicate the child. For example, my nan passed away, who was one of my primary caregivers when I was 8, and I think that had an extreme impact on my attachment growing up. And then only the mother is viewed as the primary attachment. Now, bearing in mind, obviously this was research in the early to mid 1900s, but is it 1900s? 19,000s? Why do I not know that? It was in the early to mid 20th century. So it doesn't look at the fact that we may have gay parents. There may be 2 dads or 2 mums, and then if there's 2 mums, who is the primary caregiver. Nans or granddads may look after their children. Dads maybe stay at home. Mums might go back to work almost instantly after having a child. Or there may be nannies because the parents aren't present. Or there may be no primary caregiver. Or in my case, there may be multiple caregivers. It doesn't take into account what happens in those situations. I also want to preface before I go into any of this is going to sound like I am brutalising and critiquing the hell out of parenting. My parents did an incredible job. They did the best that they could with what they had at that time, what they knew at that time. And I was never abused. I was never intentionally mistreated. And I think hindsight is a wonderful thing. I also want to say that parents, for the most part, in non-abusive situations, will never be solely to blame for the child's attachment. And there are also things that happen out of the parent's control. Like my nan passing away, my mum and dad could never control that. Glad we've cleared that up. I don't want anyone to get offended from this or hurt from this, or I don't want anyone to listen to this and then hate their parents. Not my intention. So there are 4 different attachment styles. You have got anxious preoccupied, which is also known as an anxious attachment style. You have also got fearful avoidant, which is also known as a disorganized attachment style. We have also got dismissive avoidant, which is also known as a dismissive attachment style. And then you've got secure, which is you're secure in your attachments, you're doing good. I did a test and it gave me what percentage I was of each attachment style. So I'm going to share that with you as we go along. We're going to discuss anxious preoccupied attachment style first. And this was my leader. 33% in this. So it was very close to the other second highest. But yeah, this was my you're mainly this. A little bit about an anxious preoccupied attachment style. If I'm looking at my phone, it's because I'm reading the facts and stuff. Relationships will make you feel anxious, unsafe, insecure, because it comes from a place of feeling like you're going to be abandoned. If you're in a relationship, you want closeness, and there's almost like that constant fear of that person's going to pull away at any moment. And if you start to feel them pulling away, that really triggers you. You're almost very hypersensitive to someone pulling away. So it says here that preoccupied lovers characterise their most important romantic relationships by obsession, desire or reciprocation. And there's almost extreme emotional highs and lows, normally an extreme sexual attraction, and then hence there being quite a high level of jealousy. They believe that it is easy for them to fall in love, yet they also claim that unfading love is difficult to find. So they fall in love quite quickly, but then it also vanishes as quick as it appears. Now, obviously, this is all going to be very generalised. This is going to be unique to everybody and different for everyone. And you may have a few traits that apply to you and not all of them. There are a few things that I said there which sound like me, but there's also a few things which I don't think sound like me. So the traits that come with being a anxious preoccupied attachment style, having an attachment, but anyway. There's a constant need for closeness and intimacy. You have a negative self-worth. You're overly dependent on relationships. You have a constant fear of rejection. You fear being abandoned. You have problems trusting other people. There's a constant need to please others. You need constant reassurance. You may have hypersensitivity to others' actions and needs. You have a constant search for external validation. You may be highly emotional, you may lack impulse control, and you can be unpredictable and moody. So out of those, I would say I have, oh my god, I sounded so common then. I would say I have negative self-worth. I'm definitely at times dependent on relationships. I do have a constant fear of rejection. I have a fear of being abandoned. I do have problems trusting other people. I do have a constant need to please other people. I have a constant need for reassurance. I do have a hypersensitivity to others' actions and needs. I constantly search for external validation. I may be highly emotional, and I think at times my moods can be unpredictable and moody. So the only ones I don't tick out of that is lack impulse control and have a constant need for closeness and intimacy. Let me just have a drink. We don't have any squash in the house, but I bought some lemons. So I'm having a lemon water. I feel like such a model. I just need the face to come with it. Oh look, my negative self-worth being in the room. Obviously, each different style will be caused by different parenting styles and how you as a child have felt in relation to how that parent has parented you. The causes of an anxious attachment style can be any of the following. Again, this isn't all like to the T, and also it may be one of those things and you might just be more of a sensitive child and picked up on it and taken it, if that makes sense. You might not have all of these. Inconsistent parenting is one of them, which means that parents or carers. I'm going to say, if I refer to parents, I do mean all carers. I know that not everybody has presence with their parents, and I know that some people may have their primary attachment, as though to say, with somebody who isn't a parent. Just to clarify. The carer may be cold, insensitive, or emotionally unavailable. So they may be quite guarded to their child's emotions. There may be mixed signals in the relationship dynamic, creating unpredictability, resulting in anxiety and insecurity. So that, I think that's quite clear. The child just you don't really know where you stand. It's very up in the air. You're kind of always on eggshells, not sure where you fit into the dynamic of the relationship. An emotional distance. So if the child is stressed, anxious, they need some emotional support, that parent isn't there to fulfill those needs. Intrusive parent, so there isn't any emotional boundaries between the parent and the child. It prevents the child from becoming their own person and growing independently. This can include the carer mirroring how the child behaves. So, as an example, an anxious child will make the parent anxious, or an angry child will make the parent angry. And then the last cause can be an emotional hunger from the caregiver. So this is when caregivers need to have some sort of emotional or physical need met, and they unknowingly or knowingly enforce the child to meet that need. It says here that the child therefore does not get their own needs met and may go on to put everyone else's needs above their own. So it's that thought of the child is there to support the parent. Therefore, the child thinks growing up, when they become an adult, they're there to support everybody else. So for me, I think, without talking too much about my situation growing up, because I really don't want to disrespect my family, there was unintentional emotional distance only because my parents weren't physically present because they were working. Therefore, I was at times, probably I needed them and they weren't there, but that isn't their fault. And I do think me and my mum lent on each other in, at times, a more friendship way rather than mother and child. That was very relevant to what had been going on at the time. That's not something that I'm going to go into. But I think at times I felt as though I had to be there for my mum and be there for her emotionally to support her when I potentially shouldn't have been. So now I feel like I need to be there for everyone. But again, those situations were never intentional. And this is what I mean. This is why this can be not damaging, but quite difficult, because I think it then almost puts a blame on parents that shouldn't be there. My mum would never have intended that, but it was just the situation at the time. And I definitely, if I didn't want to be there for my mum, I wouldn't have been. I wanted to protect her and look after her, and I still feel those things now. And it come from a situation we were going through at the time, but it wasn't always healthy as a small child to be dealing with such big emotions from somebody who is seen to be the caregiver, if that makes sense. This is how it has an impact on relationships, because that's the thing I've been noticing recently. We will go into this a little bit later about how I act in relationships and stuff like that with my attachment style, just in case any of you are wondering and curious based on what you've learnt with your attachment style and think you may be able to relate. But I do think it's very interesting. When I read these things to you, I think it's very, very interesting. So according to Dr. Julie Smith, who is a clinical psychologist, these are the signs of an anxious attachment style in an adult relationship. You ready? You find it hard to trust them, so you constantly seek reassurance. However, your partner will perceive this as controlling or clingy. You feel dependent on your partner, therefore, when you don't have full access to them, it can trigger feelings of anxiety or jealousy. You have a low opinion of yourself and sometimes feel worthless. In contrast, you perceive your partner in a much more positive light. So your partner is literally God and you are the devil. That's how I'm reading that, Julia. Thank you. Oh, your name's Julie. Sorry. You feel adequate only when your partner shows you approval. As a result, you're always striving to meet their expectations. Where I read that and I didn't take any of that in. You know when you read something, but like it just, like you have to read a page of a book over and over again. I literally just did that. You feel adequate only when you, right, so you only feel good when you feel like your partner approves of you. Therefore, you constantly in a state of trying to make them give you validation. Got it. You tolerate unhealthy behaviours that you acknowledge as toxic. Do I just need a drink? Oh, it's like ASMR, that. You tolerate unhealthy behaviours that you acknowledge as toxic because you're afraid that at the end of the relationship, would confirm your deep-seated belief that somehow, oh God, that's... Right, let me read this to you and like, if you've got this attachment, I'll take it in. You tolerate unhealthy behaviours that you acknowledge as toxic in a relationship because you're afraid that at the end of it would confirm your deep-seated belief that you're somehow worthless or unlovable. Bloody hell. This is what I mean. It is hard. It does hit hard. You ignore the red flags because if the relationship doesn't end, at least you're still loved. Whereas if the relationship does end, it means that it's your fault and you are actually worthless and you don't deserve to be loved. Kind of the feelings that the person gets and stuff. So relationships in this attachment style create a lot of worrying. It's difficult for you to feel secure. There's a constant worry the relationship is in trouble, so the person will leave. That's the fear of abandonment creeping in. Again, you have a strong fear of abandonment and rejection. Clinginess, and that I guess comes from worrying and becoming obsessive with the partner and not feeling good enough yourself. So obviously, if you don't feel good enough in yourself, you're going to be worried that your partner is going to find something better. So you hold your partner in high regard and then put a lot of effort into meeting their partner's needs. And I guess that comes into the being very hyper aware of your situation, your partner, to make sure you can almost keep them loving you. So I know if it was me, I would be constantly doing things that I know please the partner, like buying them gifts and stuff, or going above and beyond planning dates, or just being very, very extra to try and make them like me. And then emotional ups and downs. Don't worry, no fear here, because you can actually work with this style. So if understanding your attachment style, reflecting on your relationship with your primary caregiver, I think is really important into being able to heal any insecure attachments. I think understanding is number one, knowing is number one, and then from there you can kind of go with it and work with it. Another thing I found was self-awareness. So it's any automatic responses you have, just being very, very aware of them. So if your partner tells you they want to do an activity alone, do you automatically believe they are pulling away from you? Do you become jealous and possessive if your partner spends time with anyone else? Just being aware of those thoughts, and then maybe journaling about them afterwards, or speaking them through with your partner. Like if you feel those anxieties creeping in, just be like, I'm feeling very, very anxious right now. I'm not saying you're going to do this. This isn't anything to do with you, it's to do with me. I'm scared that you're going to be cheating on me when you go and do that without me. And then hopefully, if your partner is an incredible guy or girl, they will be able to understand your concerns and help you through that and do things to support you, so you can then have a healthier relationship. Obviously, that isn't always the case. I know that's a very dreamy scenario. And surprisingly, the next one is learning healthier communication. Just talk. I'm somebody who loves to talk, obviously, but I'm somebody who loves to be very honest about my emotions, and I know that is very difficult for some people, because I know with the anxious avoidant you can have quite extreme emotions of just like crying, and I can be like that, and I can act impulsively in terms of my emotions, but I think through therapy I'm getting better at wanting to communicate if I'm feeling anything other than okay, which I think annoys everyone. But I'm becoming zen, which I know is like such a vile thing, so intolerable. This is something that I'm currently working on doing, is reparenting your inner child. Take care of little you that's inside of you. They're still in there. And I'm going to be doing an episode on this when I figured out. I'm currently making a list of all the things that I want to do to start reparenting my inner child. I've already started. I'm just being very kind to myself. Treat yourself as though you are an innocent child. And I know that sounds insane, but it really does work. And over time, you'll then heal that little baby part of you that just needs some attention and some emotional support. I'm sure you can Google different ways to parent your inner child if you're not sure where to start. There's definitely things on Pinterest with journal prompts of parenting your inner child, or to journal. But yeah, I think that's a great way to start if you are wondering. Number 2. Go for a number 2. This is my next highest. So this is 27%, so it's not far off the 33%. And this is fearful avoidant, i.e. disorganised. So this is kind of a very general description. Relationships can feel chaotic, confusing, and overwhelming. And this comes from you swinging between anxious and avoidant. I'm anxious and then I'm avoiding you. I'm anxious, then I'm avoiding you. So it can just feel like a lot for you. Depending on the relationship, you can shift very much between hot and cold quite quickly. And you yearn for control and security. So the traits of somebody who is disorganised in their attachment style. There's a need for control and security. You have difficulty trusting others. There's a limited sense of safety, so you always feel like something will go wrong. You want a close relationship, but are so scared to get close. You have difficulty regulating your emotions. You have a negative view of yourself. You have a negative view of others. You believe that you'll be disappointed and let down by others. You may be like kind of hyperfixated on your career, so you don't really care about anyone else in your life or anything like that. Like you just want to get your career done. That you have a need to protect yourself against rejection. You may be passive or cold during interactions to create almost like a shield. You're a people pleaser. You can be hyper vigilant, so you're always looking for signs of danger. You might find it hard to maintain friendships. You have elevated levels of anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and you find it hard to self-soothe. Now, of all of those, I have a need for control and security. I find it difficult to trust others. I always feel like something will go wrong. I want to get close to people but get too scared to get actually close to somebody. I don't know if I have difficulty regulating my emotions. I'm not sure. I do have a negative view of myself. I do have a negative view of others because I always think they're going to do something wrong against me. Believe that I will be disappointed and let down by other people most of the time, but then sometimes I can be quite trusting. I think overall I'm quite trusting, but always with a hint of doubt. I do focus on my career, i.e. this. I think I hyperfixate on things to stop me from meeting people. Like, I'm too busy, I'm doing this. You're my excuse. Thank you. I think that comes from a need to protect myself against rejection. I think I can be quite cold during interactions, but I don't think that's because I'm shielding myself because I'm a very open book. That is because... No, actually. Oh my God, I do. With conversation with boys, I do. Oh, what a revelation. Revelation. Because I was thinking about it when, like, I make friends, but I'm very, very open with friends. But with boys, I'm really cold to them. Wow. This is wild. We're learning together today. I'm a people pleaser. I'm very hypervigilant. I always look for signs of danger. I'm an anxious girly at the end of the day. I do find it difficult to maintain friendships. I've got more than one friend, but there's only one friend I see consistently. Elevated levels of anxiety. I do have difficulty concentrating, and I can self-soothe, but I'd rather my mum be there. So, the causes of this can be abuse or trauma, fortunately I haven't been through abuse, but I did have traumas through my childhood. You have broken trust, so a caregiver can be inconsistent with being warm and loving in one moment, and then the next moment they're quite cold and not loving. So there's quite a difference. So the child can't predict how the parent's behaving, which means that they create coping mechanisms to deal with the elevated feelings of insecurity. There might be a lot of empty promises made to the child from the caregiver. Threatening language, so a lot of toxic language, even threats of punishment, threats of physical danger and harm to the child. Again, sometimes they want emotionally needy caregivers, so the children are used for the caregiver's emotional needs. They may express their wants and needs to their child, and then the child then carries that and wants to fix them. The child will also learn that their needs do not matter as much. So they might not have been told this, but it may be just a slow time that's how they learn to feel. And often if a child is fearfully avoidant, their caregiver is most probably fearfully avoidant, just because that is almost like a very specific behaviour pattern. So for me, I don't feel as though... So I had trauma in my childhood. I fortunately didn't have abuse. I definitely had unintentional, emotionally needy caregivers. I don't think parents broke my trust from what I'm aware of, or there was threatening language used in my household. There wasn't, not towards me anyway. But I actually don't know my parents' attachment styles. I think it would be very interesting to find out, because if either one of them are fearfully avoidant, it would make a lot of sense. because I obviously am. So working with this style, everything I mentioned previously, I think is a great tool to use for any of them. Setting healthy boundaries. This is something I really struggle with. It's something I'm working on lately. I struggle to set boundaries automatically in relationships. I give my all, whether that's friendships, family, boyfriend, girlfriend. If you know that reference, I love you. Yeah, no matter what it is, I don't have boundaries. I give you all of me or none of me, and I will take on all of you, and I will be there for you at the detriment to myself. I struggle to say I can't do that for you or be there for you, because that will be damaging for me. I struggle to put any sort of boundaries in place. So getting better at setting your boundaries, I think I'm getting much better. I find it hard to be honest about setting boundaries with people, but I've been doing it as I will distance myself if I feel like I need to, and I will have it a lot more on my terms. And I'm getting better at saying no, not without an excuse. I always come up with an excuse. Not all the time, obviously, but I do think I'm getting better at prioritising my own emotional needs. But it's something that I'm still struggling with and I'm working on. But yeah, definitely, and I've noticed it has helped. It says here, actually, this is a really good tip. Spend some time understanding what you're comfortable with and what your limits are. So whether that's journaling or something, just be clear in your mind what you need from a relationship and what you cannot give. And as soon as you're clear on that, stick to your guns and you'll be sweet. Obviously, it's not as easy as that, but... So the last two, I'm only 20% of each. So we have obviously you have a secure attachment style, which means there's not really much to say about secure attachment styles. You feel very comfortable and at ease in relationships. There's not really any anxieties. You can be openly vulnerable. You are good at communicating your needs and feelings. So I'm 20% of this, but I'm also 20% dismissive avoidant. So that is what we are talking about now. And the definition of dismissive avoidant is, so any intense emotions can feel overwhelming and you can pull away from others. You may find yourself withdrawing from arguments. There is a need for independence that can cause challenges in your relationships and in a conflict with you, because deep down you want to connect with others but cannot. So you want a human connection, of course you do, everyone does, but you're so scared to that you put your guard up and don't let anyone in, don't let anyone see you, and become very withdrawn if it gets quite serious. So the traits of dismissive avoidant people are, they're very happy with who they are, so they're very self-confident. They are very, very sociable and easygoing. They probably have lots of friends. They maybe even have lots of sexual partners, because it would be very much like no strings attached. Just kind of feel okay with having sex with loads of people without it meaning anything, and that's fine if that's you. Good for you. They generally tend not to be lonely because they're either surrounded by lots of people or they don't need that emotional connection to be reliant on anybody. They're very independent, so that's why I guess they don't tend to be lonely. They have high self-esteem and they might be invested in professional development. So like, again, very focused on your career. Relationships don't really come into your mind. I'm quite independent and I don't really tend to be lonely. So I think that's where I fit in terms of dismissive avoidant, but it's only 20% of my whole thing, which I guess is quite a lot. But yeah, so I'm very like independent. I don't really need anybody, but I'm a contradiction because I still need that emotional connection with somebody. So in terms of having relationships, you're normally quite guarded, so you don't really, you'll have people around you and you'll have somebody, say maybe you're sleeping with, and you'll start to see, but they're normally more likely to get emotionally attached and you won't let them in. You don't really like any displays of closeness, and to you sex is just sex. There will be no intimacy. If things get serious, you normally close off and run. You will find excuses to end relationships, so you might get the ick quite easily. So like if a partner. It says here you might get highly annoyed at partner's behaviour, habits or appearance. Basically, you get the ick quite easily as a form of protecting yourself. You will then start to distance yourself because you don't need the emotional intimacy to live a fulfilled life that someone with another attachment style might. The causes of this from your caregivers may be avoidance, so caregivers to avoid displays of emotion and intimacy in front of you. They tend to be reserved, back off the child's life. So say, for example, you were upset as a child and you reached out for emotional support, they'd probably be quite practical and try and steer away from any emotion. They don't do well with, your parents wouldn't have done well with emotionally intense situations. Like, you probably wouldn't have ever seen your parent cry, for example. The caregiver would shut down if the child expresses needs of closeness. So they avoid this instead of receiving that emotion and listening to that child and giving them what they needed in that moment. And the caregiver may have a lack of tolerance. So like use phrases like toughen up, get a grip, you're a crybaby, stop being emotional, or stuff like that. That is all the attachment styles. We've gone through a lot. My therapist had, like I said to you earlier, my therapist said that it's not gospel. It's kind of just gives you a guideline of where you may be at or what maybe you could do to better your relationships or make relationships or dating easier for you. And they can be unlearned and worked through, which is what I'm trying to do now. Briefly, like this can be very brief, I want to talk about my relationship with dating and guys in terms of my attachment style. So just to remind you, I'm predominantly like over 50% anxious, preoccupied, combined with fearful, avoidant. I saw this come up on TikTok, maybe you have, of the limerence concept, and it's basically unreciprocated obsession. So are you likely to like a guy that you know doesn't like you back? Are you more likely to fall for somebody that you know for a fact is completely unattainable, not even in your peripheral, like you're not even in their peripheral, know for a fact that you're like, they're not going to entertain you, yet you still become more and more and more infatuated with that person? Well, this is basically the limerence concept, and it is because of attachment styles, and I have it so bad. I'm nearly 80% more likely to like you if you do not like me. Like almost always. So that's my thing. And I think it also falls under the whole thing of becoming obsessed with celebrities or book characters or stuff like that, because they are so unattainable and out of reach that it's easier to become infatuated with them than actually dealing with having somebody like you and having to face your fear of rejection, your fear of avoidance, your fear of intimacy, your fear of connection. It's easier to fall for this unattainable person than somebody who actually does like you, because then you're like, oh, I'm gonna get hurt because I don't trust you. I just thought it's very, very fascinating. And it kind of creates, like, you think about them constantly, like, you cannot get them out of your mind. You might not even know this person very well, but you've got this idea of them that you become obsessed with, and they're literally just all your brain can think about. I think this also comes down to me. I think most of the people I have liked in the past have been avoidant. Like, reading through this, so, like, as somebody who is anxious and disorganized, I need somebody who isn't avoidant. I need somebody who's secure, yet I would never go for somebody who's secure. I've always gone for somebody who is dismissive, because they're emotionally unavailable, so they're completely unavailable to me, which then ties into the limerence concept. It's really, really fascinating. We don't really have time to go into it today. this could maybe be a mini episode or do your own research. It's all over TikTok at the minute, but I do get infatuated with celebrities, book characters, or people that don't like me back, that I know for a fact don't like me back, and I think that is representative of my attachment style. I am going to be doing a mini episode on how I'm going to be looking after my inner child, so make sure you subscribe or whatever, follow for that, because that may help you if you've come to this episode looking for more, like looking for knowledge. I hope that it's given you something. I think I've learned a lot from doing this episode. I think that being aware of your attachment style can be so beneficial for both you and anyone in your life. I hope you enjoyed. I feel like this has been a little bit different for me. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone, because I think I was speaking a lot more like I was sharing a theory, so I can easily get it wrong. I'm not sharing like an opinion or anything. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. It was quite a long time I felt like I've been talking at you. My throat is sore, I'm going to be honest. But thank you for watching, listening, nonetheless. Let's go into our 3 gratitudes and our hope for the future. I actually haven't thought about what my gratitudes or hope for the future could be. So let's have a think. My first gratitude is I got a message from somebody today, and they said that they had been listening to episodes of the pods and they felt really seen and heard. And I need to message her back actually, but she melted my heart. Like, I nearly cried. That is all I ever want. And the fact that she actually felt that and felt the need to text me that is just, well, Instagram DM me is so beautiful and special. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. But I'm so grateful for that person, and I'm so grateful that she could take something from this, because that's just wild to me. I am grateful that I went on a run today. I really wasn't feeling it, and it wasn't a good run at all. Like, I didn't run for as long as I wanted. I had a really slow pace, but I haven't beat myself up about that, and that's what I'm grateful for, because me not so long ago would have 100% have beaten myself up for the fact that I wasn't hitting at least in my normal average pace, and the fact that I would have pushed myself to finish the run. Like, I'd have pushed myself to run further, even though it would have been detrimental to me. Like, well, not detrimental, that's a bit dramatic, but it wouldn't have been good for me. I am also grateful that my mum has ordered, so it hasn't come yet, but it's going to come today hopefully, this adapter so we can watch all of our home movies. My granddad taped everything, and we have all of his old tapes, so we're going to watch them, and I'm so excited to watch them, because that's also another way I'm healing my inner child. And my hope for the future is that this is going to be a big one actually. My hope for the future that more is done for climate change. Now, I know that's rogue, but the world is really scaring me this summer. Like, I'm really battling with my climate change fears, and I just hope that I feel positively that something will be done, but I hope that things can be done quickly, because so many people are dying now because of climate change, and the world's becoming really scary. And my hope for the future is that we can all do one thing a day to support the reversal of climate change. And I hope that the governments can take it a little bit more seriously, and that these billionaires can invest some money into saving our planet. It's a bit of a deep one to end it on, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a bit different, so let me know what you think, because I'm really nervous for it. And sorry if my voice sounds a bit like, it's because I'm really claggy. Nice. But yeah, I will see you on Tuesday for a mini Barbie episode. And if you don't want to listen to about Barbie, don't know why you wouldn't want to, go and subscribe and follow and everything, and you can see an episode next Thursday. Thank you for watching or listening. I've been Erin, and this is A Conversation with Erin, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye.